welcome to the evening news. I hope you all had a great day. It's good to see you all again. Let's jump right into the news for this evening. Tonight we're going to go over two of these major battles.
The Battle of Stalingrad started on August 24th, 1942. Hitler had wanted to take over Stalingrad because Stalin had controlled the city and it was named after him. Stalingrad was on the Volga River and was a major port for the city. They wanted to take the city to show that they could have an offensive force, but Russia had stronger defense. They had attacked the city multiple times, but Stalingrad was holding back. The fights took place within the city limits. There was 40,000 civilian casualties. Russia had lost 750,000 people, and Germany had lost 850,000 people, which is why it was one of the bloodiest battles. But the German forces were not able to fight back as hard because they were not prepared with the supplies and people that they needed to withhold through the Russian winter. It was very cold and many people had died from disease and from being too cold. It had ended in February of 1943. This was a major turning point because it showed that Germany was weakening and that their forces were no longer as strong as they once thought they were.
Thanks, Allie. Stalingrad was obviously a huge turning point for the Allies. Next, we'll take a trip around to the other side of the world to talk about the Battle of Okinawa. Towards the end of this terrible war, the Okinawa campaign took place from this past April 1st until June 22nd over on the island of Okinawa, Japan. Thankfully, this battle was the last of the Pacific battles, but it also happens to be the biggest and bloodiest Pacific battle of this war. It involved 270,000 American troops and 130,000 Japanese soldiers. America took the offense on this 82-day campaign, trying to gain access to air bases that are vital to the invasion of Japan, and the Japanese started out on the defense, resisting us at the shoreline. After a while, though, the Japanese started sending out mass suicide missions called kamikaze attacks. These attacks, although not very sophisticated, were very determined and made this battle the most difficult Pacific battle for the Allied forces to face. The battle was worse than other Pacific battles due to the fact that it was held in a very populated area, and because it was held in a more densely populated area, the civilian losses were massive, with 100,000 civilian lives taken. A civilian by the name of Higa Tomiko recalls that it was a scene straight out of hell. There's no other way to describe it. She was only a 7-year-old girl at this time. The aftermath of this battle involved great losses on both sides. Both the American and Japanese generals died during the campaign. Simon B. Buckner died by artillery fire, and the Japanese Ushijima Mitsuru died by suicide. The American ground combat losses included 7,374 killed, 31,807 wounded, and 239 missing in action. The Navy suffered 4,907 killed and missing aboard, and had 34 ships sink and 368 ships damaged. We also lost 763 aircraft. The Japanese lost 2,800 aircraft, plus a battleship, a light cruiser, and 4 destroyers. The total death toll was terrible, with 77,000 Japanese soldiers dead and 14,000 American soldiers dead, and 65,000 American casualties total. These two battles had major impacts on the war, but as we all know, probably the worst thing that happened was the Holocaust. I'll send you over to Tanner to talk about the American response to the Holocaust.
Thanks, Britta. And let's start with our little blast from the past. In today's hectic world, it is hard to fully understand all the true details of America's actions. Today we will be looking back at how we handled the first news of the Holocaust, and if our responses were appropriate and moral. When World War I first was occurring, many Jews searched for salvation from Hitler in other countries. Escaping proved more difficult than planned, for very few countries accepted the Jewish citizens in, including America. Until 1921, America participated in open immigration, allowing any and all healthy immigrants. But after 1921, America restricted immigration, including reducing the amount of Europeans allowed in the country. When the stock market crashed in 1929, President Hoover greatly increased the restrictions on immigration in an effort to save American jobs. Unfortunately, Adolf Hitler rose to power in 1933, so when the Jewish people tried to flee from Hitler's oppression, most were turned away from the safety of the American shores by our government. Even after the New York Times reported on the tragedies of the Holocaust on November 24, 1942 in their paper, the United States government did nothing in response to the Jewish American communities trying to save their brothers and sisters in Europe. Eventually, the American and British government met in April of 1943 in the Bermuda Conference. But instead of finding ways to save Jewish lives, the two governments focused on where to put the successfully rescued Jews. The meeting resulted with no real plan to help the Jewish people trapped in Europe. But the public was told that significant progress was underway. On January 22, 1944, the War Refuge Bond Board, or the WRB, was established. The WRB was involved with saving as many as 200,000 Jewish people from the Nazi grasp. But one can only imagine how many families, mothers, and children of the 6 million killed could have been saved if the U.S. would have responded to the news of the mass killing in 1942, nearly two and a half years earlier. Many could argue that the U.S. couldn't involve itself in the war because of the Depression, but that brings up the question, how much is a human life worth? Was the American economy truly worth the millions of human lives tortured and killed in the concentration camps?
Thanks, Tanner, for being here tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you. And that's all for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. See you tomorrow.